Edward MacDowell. His Native American themes as they relate to the musical identity of America. So, Edward MacDowell's timeline, a little bit about him. He was born in 1860, which is actually a disputed fact. The original biography that was done about him a year after he died got his date wrong. And so it was a big controversy for a while trying to figure out when he was actually born. But the consensus is that he was born in 1860. His mom saw promise in him. He lived in Manhattan, and he started piano at age 5. He went through a couple teachers in his time, his beginning years doing piano. He had a teacher from Cuba and a teacher from, I think, Venezuela. And anyway, when he turned 15, he and his mom decided that he needed more education, so he applied and got into the Paris Conservatory, so they moved to Paris. He was there for a while under a very prestigious teacher, and eventually he became dissatisfied with his education he was getting there, so he moved to Germany. That's where he met Liszt, and Liszt actually praised his works. He was composing some during that time. He got married in 1884. Then in 1888, because of financial reasons, they had to move back to America, him and his wife. Most of his famous works, along with the ones I'll be talking about, were composed during the following years when he lived in America. I think they first moved to Boston, lived in Massachusetts for a while, and then bought some land and moved to New Hampshire, but they were in New England the whole time. Controversy begins. In 1889, there was an American music concert in Paris with all American music on the bill, and Edward MacDowell's music was in it, and he had no problem with that. And then the following year, in 1890, there was another all-American music concert in Detroit, and he also was fine with that. But then, in 1891, when his work was supposed to be played at an all-American music concert in Massachusetts, he started protesting and tried to get his music pulled from there and said that he didn't want it to be in a concert that was just American music. But it didn't work, and they still had it there. So that kind of was the turning point of when he started to not like sort of nationalistic or national framed concerts. Continued controversy when, so he says he doesn't like nationalistic stuff or music that is written specifically to represent someone's nation. But they found a notebook back from when he still lived in Europe where he had written plans about writing with Native American themes from Longfellow's poem, The Song of Hiawatha, and he wrote down in this notebook plans to write a song about Hiawatha in Minnehaha, I think is how you say it, characters from Longfellow's poem about these two fictional Native American characters. So that was like the first instance they found of him showing interest in something that was quote-unquote American. And then in 1891, he wrote to Henry Gilbert asking him to send him this dissertation about different Native American music and culture. So then all of this culminates when in 1896 he composes Suite Number 2, which is called Indian. It's more often it's referred to as the Indian Suite. So we're going to be looking at Movement 4, which is the dirge. And dirge means funeral-like, mournful, kind of like drudging on. And in this movement, you'll hear this 3-note motive. So the first note to the second note in this original movement is a small interval, usually half step or whole step. And the second note to the third note is a larger interval, but as far as I could find in that movement, it was usually less than a third. But it was just kind of very dirgy. Other works containing the dirge motive. So it's not a big deal yet. Okay, he likes Native American themes. Not a big deal. He writes this piece, well, there are people who have said that he's kind of hypocritical because he was very adamant about not wanting or not thinking that people should write music specifically for a country or to serve its purposes. He's quoted saying stuff about it only serves politics, about let the music speak for itself. He doesn't wish to raise a Navajo melody up to the political standards. He's about the all-American music concerts. He said that he doesn't like that idea because it doesn't matter if the music is good or not. If somebody hears it's on like a bill of all-American composers, they're going to either automatically praise it more than it's worth or automatically critique it. They'll go in with like preconceived notions about it. And so he just didn't like all of that. So then some people have found, there were multiple critics that had traced this dirge motive, and they found it in other pieces that he's done. The Sonata Tragica for piano. In the left hand, during measures 5 through 8, you'll hear there are longer notes, but you hear that 3-note motive, and it's not exactly like it is in the dirge movement. The intervals are not as exact, but the left hand repeats an ostinato of descending, a set of 3 descending notes. Sonata Eroica also has it in measures 280 through 305. C pieces, they're actually in 3 of the 4 movements. It contain this dirge motive. Measures 1 through 4 of the first movement, which is this first sound clip, has it's kind of like just a little intro that's constantly descending. I think that one's kind of hard to tell it's in there, but if you looked close enough, you could find that dirge motive. The next one for the C pieces is in a later movement, measures 1 through 10, and I think it's kind of obvious there when you hear that 3-note descending motive. It's in Fireside Tales and his New England Sketches. I think this one is the most obvious out of all of them. Okay, so there's some examples of this dirge motive, so this Native American motive that he puts in later works. So they're trying to build a case that even though he says he's not a nationalistic writer, it sounds like he's trying to create some type of sound through all these different, because all these pieces are not focused around or advertised to be Native American, and yet he's using this motive to make them sound Native American. So in a roundabout way, he's trying to create a specific sound. So when you hear that motive, you're thinking, oh, that's the American composer, that's Native American. Okay, so MacDowell versus the critics. Richard Crawford was one of the critics that saying that MacDowell is actually a nationalistic writer. He pointed to the dirge motive and just his interest in general of Native American themes, and also the fact that if you look at Edward MacDowell's life in his early years, he had a Venezuelan, a Cuban, and a Colombian, I think, teacher teaching him music. Then when he moved to France and then Germany, and he studied music and wrote music in all these other countries, especially a big musical powerhouse like Germany at the time. And so Richard Crawford said that the reason he's doing this is he is trying to sound American, but he's trying to sound not German. But in order to say he's sounding not German, if that was MacDowell's actual reasoning behind it, that would be for him to admit that national music is a thing. Because not only did he not like writing music for nationalistic purposes, should have said this earlier, but he claimed that there is no such thing as national music, that people just write music and that it's like a made-up thing. But if he's trying to sound not German, then he has to admit that there is a German sound. And the copious amounts of dirge motives, obviously, is the main reason why they're saying that he was trying to go for some kind of national style. And if that was the truth, if he was trying to do that, it didn't work, and also he would have been a liar. Okay, but anyway, counter-arguments He wrote more about Norse and Celtic mythology over his life than Native American. So if that was his motive, it kind of fizzled out. So he must not be a very good nationalist if he doesn't set his entire life to writing nationalistic music. He's also quoted as saying he just liked the emotion of Native American themes, and he would also get really specific about how they were performed. So this is in favor of him not being nationalistic. He only wrote these pieces because he really did just like the music itself and the emotion. He would get mad at conductors or performers if they weren't playing with enough emotion, that it was just bland, and he wanted it to convey the feeling of Native American. And also, another big reason was that if he was going to try to make a national music of America, Native American would not have been a very good one to pick, because the majority of Americans did not have cultural heritage that was Native American. So it would not have included very many people that lived in America. So it doesn't exactly make sense. So in conclusion, even though, yes, MacDowell did use these motives, and you can, if you really tried, on some of them are obvious. He probably did use that motive later. Maybe he just liked it, the dirge Native American motive. But there's not a whole lot of evidence other than that, considering he said many times that he was opposed to nationalistic music, and he didn't agree with it, didn't like it, didn't think it was real. And yeah, he did write some other, I guess, American type of music. His woodland sketches had to do with like the nature in America, but everything was very inconsistent, so there's not a lot of evidence to support him being an American composer with the intention of sounding American. And also, like I said, the fact that most Americans were not Native American, he would not have been representing the whole of America by trying to get Native American themes to be the national music of America. Thank you.